another episode of Lead with Jeffrey podcast. I'm Jeffrey Hernandez, your host, and today we'll be unlocking the blueprint of a remarkable journey of a young man who has been able to go from the vault of finance to the transformative efforts of global leadership, who today is ready to lead a company to success. More importantly, has been able to acquire throughout his journey the expertise required to lead a team in manifesting a vision with action and results. Today in our studio, we have the honor of having Arthur Peschansky, who is not only a CEO in residence, but who brings a wealth of knowledge that today will be unraveled for you as you understand the world of an executive in a traditional pathway. Today, we will be learning from him what it takes to acquire an organization that you're going to be leading as the future CEO. So with no further delay, Arthur, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great to meet you, Jeffrey, and be here, Jeffrey. And thank you for having me. I started my career in a traditional way. Was the first person in my family to go to college in the U.S. and build a career in the U.S. and kind of followed the steps of those above me. And at that situation, it was going to finance. It was a great place to kind of build a background and a first step in my career. I had an opportunity to work in a bank in New York. For me, though, a passion that I've always followed is trying to understand how to build a business, how to lead an organization and create organic value. As I looked at next steps, a lot of really talented individuals were looking for private equity or hedge funds or investment roles. It seemed like a really interesting world that was evolving at the time. For me, tried to find an opportunity to step to that next level, but also do it in a way where I could learn how to build businesses, and found an opportunity with a pretty, at that time, very innovative firm called Serent Capital out in San Francisco. It was my first experience working really directly with entrepreneurs, with individuals who have built businesses and grown those businesses over time. And through that role, I got an opportunity to both be an investor, but also support those businesses as they grew. And I, in my journey personally, realized that I really enjoyed that work of being in the business with the team, creating that value. And Serent was very, very good at what they did. Ultimately, got to a point where I wanted to take the jump and explore what entrepreneurship could mean. Got a chance to go to business school, and through that, really a time to explore different career paths, network with people, and kind of realized that there were different nuances to what entrepreneurship meant. Realized that actually starting my own business wasn't really a path that was right for me, and happy to talk more about what that meant. But ultimately decided that the operational path is the one I wanted to go down and explore further. A mentor of mine had advised that if you want to learn how to be an operator, go to one of the biggest companies that exist and learn how a great organization operates. Had the opportunity to jump into a bigger business, and a group of individuals that took a bet on me. I had never really worked in that type of role before, and got a chance to go to AB InBev, which is effectively Anheuser-Busch in the U.S., manufacture and sell brands like Budweiser, Bud Light. And never thought I'd be in a beer company, but had an opportunity to really learn how to operate a business and what a great operator looks like through a variety of roles. And now I had a chance with some individuals that I got to know over time, and really had an opportunity to join their group as it was starting and being built. It's called the Bryden Group, and would love to tell you more about what we're up to, but it's a chance to kind of combine the different skills that I've built over time and work in a more entrepreneurial capacity, but entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is a different type of path that I didn't know about earlier in my career, and kind of taking more of a bet, both on myself and with my partners at the Bryden Group to create value and hopefully find a great business to kind of build and continue the legacy of that business, but also build my own legacy going forward. So very much looking forward to what the future might lead.
So Arthur, even before we go into the business journey, which is remarkable in itself, you are a first generation immigrant, and there's so many people that come to this country and don't realize that with hard work, with a vision, you can get results. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Had an opportunity, and I guess got lucky, right? That my parents, when they were a little younger than me at this point, just thinking through that at my age, when I was 27 or so, and my mom was even younger, to leave everything you knew behind and take a bet and go into a new country for this hope that their kids, right, could live better than they did or have better opportunities in the future, is something that, as I reflect now, is pretty remarkable. And I think I owe a lot to them. Growing up, it's something that for me has been an internal drive and a passion, and family is something that's really important to me. It's been instilled by my grandparents, my parents. We have a small family, all really close knit around the Detroit area, but recognizing over time the bet that they took, and I think having the benefit of the investment that they put in me and my development throughout my life and career is something that's really driven and motivated me. I think it's also influenced a bit of the path that I've taken. Want to prove their bet right, that they took a big risk. And ultimately, for me, it's important to respect that risk that they took and hope to kind of build in the same vein, a great future for myself, for my family, support them, but also, as I now have a young daughter, kind of pay that forward as well. So it's something that very much has influenced the choices I've made throughout my career and kind of been a deep-rooted reason for being, I guess, for me, as I've pursued, my own life choices and my career as well.
You're definitely an example of when someone comes to this country as an immigrant, they have a dream, they can put forth the work and they will get the results. So I congratulate you on that, because it's definitely something that for our listeners, you could exemplify for some of those emergent learners that are trying to go out there and craft their path, but they're an immigrant and they're using that as an excuse. And you've been an example that that's not an excuse. On the contrary, it should be a motivation. So congratulations again on that.
Thank you.
Going into your first experience in business, you decided to go into the vault of finance. Tell us about that world. What did you find? What did you experience? And what did you learn?
Sure. Finance for me, as I went into my experience in undergrad, right, I had an opportunity to be in business school there, and really it was a logical step. When you look at the individuals and the kind of the training and the background that we had in our business school program, a step that made a lot of sense for me and some other classmates of mine was either investment banking or consulting. And these were, high-profile jobs that were really exciting, but you didn't really know what you were getting into. And had an opportunity then, right, in New York at the firm I was at Rothschild. It's really an advisory role. What you're doing is you're helping business owners and leaders of their companies go through these big financial questions that they're trying to figure out, which ultimately there's certain things related to running the business day-to-day operations, but then there's a lot of influence and factors that can really change these companies of who are the investors, how is the business financed, what type of capital are they bringing, right? That could be investment or loans and different things like that. And ultimately, it's a whole world that exists. It adds a lot of value to companies. There's a lot of investors out there that are interested in the success, of these companies. And so it's a world that I got to experience firsthand. Really how I look at it in my career journey was it's also incredible training ground. When you're in undergrad, when you're a student, you learn a lot of great things about a lot of different fields, depending on where your expertise is or your focus is. But these types of jobs, especially the one that I went through in investment banking, it teaches you a lot of values, first of all, of hard work and kind of perseverance. And, the job wasn't easy. It took long hours and things like that. But then on the other side, it also gives you tangible skill set. So what does it mean to evaluate a business, to understand if it's a good or bad investment, to also work in Excel and some tools that you can then leverage throughout your career. So I look at it as kind of this training ground that was definitely intense. There were long hours, there were certain requirements in that role, but ultimately in certain ways it paid off in a huge way. And it's kind of a foundation that I've leveraged for the rest of my career.
Let me ask you, because there's a lot of listeners that are currently in business school and could be taking advantage of every moment in business school and maybe not. What were some of the things that, if you could go back to business school, you would have focused on more to prepare for that first job when you entered the finance world?
Sure. I think a lot of it is potentially trying to get tangible experience. And that doesn't need to be a high-profile internship or a big job while you're in college. There's local businesses all around the area. And so I think I had some of those opportunities, worked with some businesses locally, participated in some clubs and activities, but there's always an opportunity to do more of that. right? And I think the more you can get a very real experience and also work closely with the business owner, trying to understand what's the mindset of that owner, what do they think about, what do they care about, that really, I think, helps prepare you for, as you're, especially just the roles that I went into, right, in finance, consulting, these types of career paths. You're the advisor to these individuals. So trying to understand who are they, how do they think, that's a really helpful skill set to have. The other facts, Excel is definitely in this world a very useful tool. PowerPoint as well. So working in some of those and getting a real tangible skill set, being comfortable working in kind of driving analysis or putting things together, putting presentations together. I guess if you have that experience earlier on, it just makes it easier when you're stepping into this world. Having said all of that, though, some of these companies, they recognize that individuals that are coming in often don't have the skills. And so they do an amazing job of training. And actually, one of the most talented individuals in my analyst class was a philosophy major in undergrad. And so he had never talked to business owners. He had never worked in Excel, but he was able to learn quickly and had an awesome mindset to be able to do well in the role. So in some ways, yes, you can kind of get the experience early, get an edge, call it. But in other ways, I do think spending time learning about broad topics, there's not a lot of opportunities in life to just learn for the sake of learning. And so I do think, as an example, for me personally, I was also a double major in Spanish. And to be honest, I maybe didn't pursue the Spanish major for all the best academic reasons. I needed my parents wanted me to get a dual degree. And I thought, hey, I think Spanish would be a fun one, right? An interesting one to do. But actually, I think it's one of the things that has helped me a lot in my business career. And as you become an operator, especially working with people, being able to connect to people of different cultures and backgrounds. Who knew that the Spanish degree that I pursued actually was one of the most helpful things I did. So yeah, in some ways get the tangible skill set, but also that broad world experience will help you in the rest of life.
I think our listeners heard it directly from a person that was in business school and went into the vault of finance in his first job in an industry in which a lot of skill sets were required. And as a business student, he's saying you need to focus on getting exposure, experiences, being a learner beyond the four walls of a classroom, and finding those opportunities to be next to an operator, ask the right questions, and seek that information that's going to allow you to put the good things in a good pocket and the bad things in the bad pocket, so that when you do get into that job, you have the experiences. But if you don't have enough of those, don't worry, because from his own experiences, he has found that in that business that you're going to apply for, there's going to be an onboarding process that's going to help you get those skill sets, because they already know you're coming with a need for that training. So don't worry, it's coming and you'll have it. Continuing that experience, you were in that job, you decided, I'm done with what I have here, I've gotten the experience, I'm going somewhere else. What was the next journey for you?
Yeah, in some ways, this first job is kind of expected to be a training program. You put in the time and you hopefully do a great job for the firm that you're with, but there is a kind of an expectation in the industry that often folks will leave after 2 to 3 years. Some end up staying and pursuing that career path, which is great. It's just ultimately for me, the longer term dream and that focus of trying to figure out how to build businesses, going to that next step is something that I was excited by. For me, that similar path, again, I didn't necessarily have a lot of family or other members to guide me throughout my career path. And so I looked at those around me, and a lot of individuals were stepping into these investment firms. There was a big opportunity to then interview and recruit, and you're meeting with firms all over the country, and you realize they all have very different strategies. Investing is another very big umbrella term. And so there were everything from hedge funds to large private equity funds. And as I started learning about what their strategies were and how they created value, something that resonated deeply with me was it's more of a world called kind of growth investing, or there's also venture investing, that there are these different terms that get thrown around, and others, you hear about them often. And I really enjoyed that kind of growth type of world where you get to invest in a business, but you also have to have skill sets of helping build that business. And that's really what appealed to me a lot. And had the opportunity to find a firm that was really a profile of investors that were a little different at that time, where they weren't just finance folks and financially trained. They were very good at that.
Which firm was that?
It's called Serent Capital. One of the individuals actually that started the firm was an operator himself. He had actually acquired a business and had a very successful outcome. And the other individual who founded it was actually a consultant. He was one of the top consultants from McKinsey in their West Coast office. And so a different profile of investors, excuse me, than you would see normally. And the role involved both investing in businesses, a lot of that financial work that other firms are doing, but also kind of like more the consulting or operating work where you get to spend time with the company, you get to unlock value. And that part is really what was interesting to me. It seemed like a different approach to investing. And I think the world over time has evolved and more firms are doing that type of investing, that type of approach. But it was a really cool opportunity and cool chance to be part of that.
Arthur, from your first job where you were in the finance world to this second job where now you went into the private equity, what were the skill sets that you took from your first one that you were able to build upon in your second one?
Absolutely. I think the biggest skill set and really a lot of the interviews it was a case study. That was really the toughest or the most, call it hard skill or tangible thing that I needed to have. And that's what I learned from my first job. This was having the ability to evaluate a business, understand the right questions to ask to figure out, is it a good potential investment or a bad one? Like, what are the risks? Every business has risks, and so you need to be able to understand how high are those risks and how comfortable are you to step in and manage them. And then the other piece, and this is kind of the hard skill set, is what would you pay for that business? And so valuation is a skill set that you really spend a lot of time learning and honing in the first role, in the investment banking role. And so ultimately, a lot of that associate role or the first role in private equity is you get thrown these opportunities and it comes through various channels, but you're going to ultimately look at a business and say, okay, and to your bosses, hey, I said, yes, this is a great investment, or no, it's not. Here are the reasons why. Write up a memorandum about that, and then put a model together and say, this is what I would pay for this business, my recommendation. And the way Serent was structured at the time was we would go into investment committee. We would all sit in a room with the top partners at the firm, all at the table, and they would bring up this investment, bring up a potential company in front of everyone, and you would get to be the first person that spoke. So they let the associates speak first, which definitely, a challenge and some pressure, but pretty cool opportunity too. And so that's the skill set that was really important, is being able to say in a quick, succinct way, yes, I'm in. I think this is a great investment. These are some of the risks. And ultimately, this is my recommendation for valuation and next steps. And so I think that was kind of the biggest skill set that you take away and you hone and learn. But in investment banking, it's more advisory. In private equity, that's where the risk is on, is some of the recommendations you make. When you're more junior, yes, there's other individuals that are kind of tweaking and refining your judgment. But as you get more senior, it's on you, right? And there's real capital at work, and there's real risk that if it goes
accountability.
Well, accountability. Yeah.
Let me ask you, when if I'm a person in a job and I'm making the decision, is this the time for me to change as I continue my business trajectory, or is it the time for me to remain and learn some more? What indicated for you that it was the right time for you to move?
Do you mean from the first job to the second?
Correct. From the finance world to the private equity firm.
Yeah. In some ways, the industry or kind of the environment you're in defines it for you. And so in an interesting way, when I started that first role and the other individuals in the industry in my analyst class, you get reached out to by recruiters. And so it was a funny dynamic, but you're 3 months into the job, don't really know much. You're starting to learn and get that training, and recruiters are reaching out saying, so which firm, what's the next step? What do you want to do? And so it moves pretty quickly. Some individuals ended up getting that second job locked up even before their first year ends in the analyst program in their bank. That happens in consulting. It happens in some industries. And so it makes you start thinking quickly and evaluating these big questions of, do I want to move? Where do I want to move? What do I want to do? So I think in some ways it's kind of a forcing function. By getting put into those conversations and pursuing those conversations, you're starting to think about that next step. For me personally, I think it was a decision of a way that I've always pursued my career, is trying to look at the most senior individual at the place you're in, right? And so the most senior banker, the most senior private equity professional, the most senior operator, right, in the business, and look at them and say, do I want to do what they do day to day? Do I want to have that job? And then also, do I want to live that life, right? Do I want to have the same work-life balance? Do I want to travel the same amount that they do? And I think you really need to think that through and really evaluate that. And so for me, ultimately, as I kind of saw the banking world and I saw some of the requirements in there, it was a personal decision that, I think what I believe private equity to be is a better fit and alignment with ultimately the kind of life I want to live, the role I want to have, the day-to-day things that I want to do.
But I think that the way you've highlighted it and the reflective practice of identifying the senior leader, looking at their work-life balance, looking at what they do day-to-day and saying, if I am them 10 years from now, is that the life I want to live, is a great rubric for our young entrepreneurs in the business world to determine, do I remain in this job? Do I need to go to search for a new one? And I think sometimes we don't think of it that way. And what a good perspective for our listeners to utilize in the process. As you continued your journey, you were in the private equity and now you decided it's time to make another move. What made you decide in that moment, I'm changing, and how did you select your next stop?
Sure. So again, in some ways, there is this forcing function where the private equity associate program is also kind of expected to be 2 to 3 years, and then you decide, do you want to stay or move on? And a natural next step is potentially business school, right? It's this place where you can kind of take a pause in your career and evaluate, what's that next journey for you look like? So similarly, there's other people applying, and so it gets you thinking about that. That was one. But two, for me, especially in the route that I was in, I had this exposure to some of these entrepreneurs, and I met some of the individuals that were building businesses. And ultimately that was something that really, really excited me, is being able to, again, look at, well, what is the life that some of the most senior professionals in the private equity world are living? What's the day-to-day role that they're in? And also, ultimately, what gets them most deeply, excited. And
so you use the same rubric again.
Same rubric. And so for me, as I looked at that and had exposure to these entrepreneurs and had the opportunity to also feel it a little bit, where I was doing some of the work, and at that point, you're not necessarily owning the result. The entrepreneur truly is owning the business and is in the team, but you get to feel it a little bit by being next to them and partnering. And some of that feeling of, hey, we created this evaluation or the strategy and we put it in place and it worked, and that feeling of we were part of it, it was the team, that's what really excited me in a lot of ways. And so maybe another layer to that rubric is look at that most senior individual, look at what the path could be 10, 20 years from now, but also look at the work you're doing today or that next job, and is that thing deeply motivating to you? And so I think if you can align both of those, that North Star, that long term, with also the feeling day to day you're getting. And so that's what led me to kind of pursue the next path of saying, well, for me personally, that feeling that I was getting day to day, I think this entrepreneur, this operator world is going to unlock that more for me personally. That's what led me to fully making the jump.
And so in that journey, you ended up leading or co-leading an industry that was totally different for you. Can you share a little bit about that experience and how did you select it?
Do you mean then moving to Anheuser-Busch?
Yes.
Yeah, ultimately, I jumped into the business for a variety of reasons. One was looking at, along the lines of what that mentor had said to me, looking at a big business, one that was a leader in an industry. I had the opportunity through my career earlier to see a lot of different end markets through the investor path and the banking path. And again, that kind of near term, where's the passion, where are you excited? The consumer goods industry, of all things, never knew or never thought. But as I was seeing physical products getting manufactured, the branding, like those different components, is something that just personally interested me. And as I had the experience then, it was, okay, the operator path, consumer goods, what potential opportunities exist there? And I think in some ways you get lucky, right? So I found myself at a talk where companies come to campus and they speak. And so the CEO of AB InBev came to campus to speak. And again, it was that feeling. And so sometimes I would advise individuals, you have to be thoughtful, right, about, and kind of meticulous and structured about how you make decisions. And so that's what led me to maybe sitting in that room, call it. But sometimes you got to let the passion, drive you. And so as I was sitting in that room, the CEO was giving a talk that the structure or the format was called Dream People Culture. It was a lot of the way that the business and the ethos under which the business operated. And I was so pumped sitting in that room. It led me to actually walk up to the CEO after the talk and ask him for a job.
Wow.
And conveniently, the head of recruiting was right next to him. And he said, well, awesome. I love the passion, but talk to her. She's who you need to talk to. So just had a chance to get in front of the right person at the right time. My resume ultimately got its way to the right people. And through those series of conversations, got included in what's called their global MBA program. So it's like a leadership development program. A strange kind of some lucky events that played out, but call it under the framework that I was pursuing. Had the opportunity to join that company.
But what courage to go to a conference or a presentation and have the CEO pump you up with their message and you say, I'm going to go ask for a job. But if you would not have done that, maybe you would not be sitting here today after all the journey you've been through. So that was the step, that passion, that inner strength to say, I want to go after that, made you make that move and gave you the opportunity. Now you went from the Volta Finance to private equity to now leading an organization that distributed beer. How did that feel and what did you learn?
And so in a certain way, AB InBev took a bet, right? It was an individual from private equity doing more analytical work to put that person into more of a people leadership or a management type position. I didn't make that final leap, but there was kind of an intermediary step. So the first role with AB InBev or with Anheuser-Busch at the time was a little bit of kind of a choose your adventure, right? It's a big company. And so they ultimately ask individuals, well, where would you like to be and what role would you like to take on? For me personally, the passion or the excitement was to potentially run a business or learn how to run a business. And to get there, leading an organization is a critical skill. And so the first role was kind of a trade-off of, okay, you have a skill set in analytics and business strategy and these types of aspects. Well, we have a department that kind of does that type of work. But also my ask was, hey, I want to learn how to lead a team and I need to learn how to lead an organization. And that was not only my ask, but kind of told to me of, hey, if you want to lead a company at some point, you're going to need this skill set. Right. And so I had a chance to basically work on the team of a really, really amazing operator.
And to be honest, as a CEO myself, that it's one of the hardest task that we have and the hardest part of our job, which is to lead the people.
Yep.
And that experience really prepares you to understand the diversity in the workforce and how each person has to be led as an individual, because really you have to know enough about them to lead them, and in turn you can't just have a cookie cutter approach to how you lead them. So that must have been a great experience. Share some of what you learned.
Yeah, and so this first role got to be part of the revenue management department and lead an organization. We called it Revenue Management and Sales Intelligence, part of a team that ultimately led a business unit, a very large business for Anheuser-Busch, but we had our specific function and our specific role. And so not only to your point, I guess you learn that different profiles of individuals are quite different, right, than others. And even within that team we're all doing similar work, pricing, strategy, analytics. There's different personalities within that. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time that I also wasn't this individual contributor that was the only person doing the work. And you realize that to get the work done as a team, you need to communicate to that team, and you need those individuals to execute on the strategy that your team is trying to accomplish.
And to be honest, Arthur, there's a lot of individuals who are very intellectually bright. They have a lot of capacity. When they're working in isolation and their success is only in their hands, they're very successful and they can have great results. But the moment they have to lead through others and it becomes part of their communication and their skill set that has to be trained, they really don't do well. So that's definitely a good skill that you had to learn early on. What were your challenges during that time? Do you want to share some of the challenges that you experienced?
Yeah, I think there were two main challenges. One was that communication. And I just will never forget, I walked up to one of our analysts on the team and I asked her, hey, can you put together this analysis that we need to know about this information? And then she proceeded with a series of questions of, well, what exact time frame, what exact product, what exact, there were just this list of specific things that I had never used the tools that she was using. I never even thought that there were so many nuances to how to pull that data and how to put that analysis together. And in the beginning, I reacted with frustration of like, well, what do you mean? And it was hard you have to adjust your own communication to meet them where they are and how they think, right? And if you want that individual to ultimately execute, you need to give very, very clear direction or in a way that they can execute on. So that was the first challenge, is changing the way I spoke or communicated with the team.
And what's really powerful about what you're stating is that I have found in my experience that everyone has a different starting point to every task. I could be at a starting point for this particular assignment and my next assignment be at a different starting point. And so when you're leading people, you can't believe that because in this particular task you gave them, they were here, that this other task, they're going to be there as well.
Yeah.
And so the diagnostic part of you being able to assess that place where they're at is very important. That skill set is critical.
Yep.
And with precision as well, because you could misassess or not assess them correctly and end up not guiding them appropriately or training them appropriately.
Yeah.
What was the second thing you learned?
The second one, and I'll be upfront, that the individuals that were mentors to me that even helped influence me getting this role, they told me up front two main things. Like, one, don't be a bull in a china shop. So basically, don't go around trying to break everything. And then two is you have two ears and one mouth. And, for me personally, as an individual, I have a lot of passion and excitement. And if managed or communicated the wrong way, it can come across as very aggressive, right? And so I need to be careful to come across and show myself and my passion in the right way, especially with my team. And I do think that, especially coming from a world of maybe more finance that's fast-paced, that's rigorous, where sometimes the style of communication with individuals is a little bit more upfront and blunt. I think I failed early on to recognize the new environment I was in and potentially communicate the right way with the team, and also allow the team to execute themselves rather than me pushing my own perspective on them. So there were situations early where I should have, I believe, let my team members, especially my managers who ran their teams, make decisions and see the outcome of their decisions. Even though in my perspective, I thought one of the decisions specifically was wrong, I should have let them make that decision and then play it out a little longer term. And then we could have adjusted from there and had a great learning. Instead, what I did was pushed and said, no, this is the wrong thing. We shouldn't do this. And kind of, in a way, undermined some of the manager's capabilities, and not necessarily in front of, but through the team. And that led for a little bit of a breaking of the relationship and the trust, right? And so it was a short-term versus long-term decision. Short-term, we made maybe a better decision, moved more quickly. But long-term, it broke a key dynamic in the team, and it took a long time to kind of unwind or rebuild that. So
I tell you, it's funny you said that, because I always share with leaders that I train that sometimes you have to go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
And learning and teaching takes a long time. It takes longer than just guiding and doing. But in the long term, you'll actually benefit with a greater ROI because you have empowered that team with the skill set to be able to do the work. And a lot of people will not agree that productive struggle is very important in your team members, but it does give them the opportunity to self-reflect and own the circumstance. And they can't get a better why to the feedback you're giving them than their own experience of the failure. Yeah. And that's why when you plan your task, it needs to be planned in a way that allows the time for that failure and the time to fix any failure that occurs. Yeah. But you should be celebrated, because at a very emergent state of leadership in your trajectory in that organization, you were able to reflect on your mistake and own it. Did you change your way of doing things, and what did you see different in the results?
It took time, but ultimately what it led to was maybe a different operating philosophy or approach of, we, to your point, moved slow to then move fast, but call it the end state of where we got was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had, honestly, personal or business life, where the team we had built was truly like a cast of characters that you wouldn't have thought that those individuals would be kind of the best analytics team or best, revenue management, sales intelligence team, I think in the country at that point. Maybe there were others out there, so I don't know. I don't want to be too competitive here, but we had an individual who led pricing, who before that, she was an accountant. And I don't think a lot of people would have taken, call it, her profile and said, hey, I think she would be a great individual here. We had an individual who led our, call it, sales intelligence side of things that ultimately before that was a trader, right? He traded and was an investor. Had another individual, she led some of our promotions and discount strategies around the Midwest, and she had run a brewery before, or actually was an operator, right? And so it was so cool to see that we could build an organization that ultimately had a lot of trust. We empowered, and I would hope that I empowered those individuals to operate. And yes, early we made some mistakes and did certain things, but by the end of it, they were running their departments fully. They owned it. They owned the results. And me as a leader, I got to focus on certain things that maybe elevated the organization, were a little different than what I could have day to day. And so it allowed us as an organization to kind of elevate the game and create some cool things, innovate in new ways, which it was a lot of fun.
Let me ask you, what do you feel was the greatest challenge about leading a team? You had the opportunity to lead a team. You had the opportunity to go about it telling them, this is what you should do, and do it. And then you reflected and understood the collaboration it would take. But what was the greatest challenge in your leadership skills that you found you needed to develop?
I think it ultimately was teaching, right? Ultimately, it was a dynamic of balancing how to inspire that individual to lead without necessarily doing the work for them, right? Or trying to constantly be in the work. There's some of these roles, I mean, there's surgeons out there that are truly saving lives, right? I wouldn't argue that we were necessarily saving lives. It wasn't like the most critical, environment, but it gets intense and work gets, there's pressure and there's results that need to be driven. And so as a leader, you feel that pressure and you own it, right, for the team. And so there's this constant trade-off of, well, I want us to move faster, and I think I could step in, and I think I can help improve it. But being in it, kind of undermining an individual in their work is not the right outcome. And so I think a lot of it is pulling yourself back, and then also having kind of the humbleness to realize that, hey, there's other people that can actually do it much better than I can, and letting them do the work, stepping back and waiting for a great potential outcome versus always being the one that's kind of guiding, I think is a really tough trade-off and tough balance to hit the right way.
I think you heard it straight from someone who's had the experience to not only be led in his first two experiences, but lead a team. And we understood from his experiences that there's certain characteristics that you want to institute as a leader. One, sharpening your communication, understanding that communication is everything to the success of your team. They need to understand the why, the how, and the what in every assignment and task that you need them to produce so that they can bring you a quality product, one that you can be happy with. Second, you have to be able to understand the starting point of each individual and how that starting point is going to impact the amount of teaching that you need to provide them, the amount of support and guidance throughout their journey, making sure you have those checkpoints in the process to ensure that at the end, when that ROI needs to be before you and that product needs to be completed, it's there to the quality that you're expecting. And more importantly, being humble to understand that you're not the end and all, and that you're not the expert, that among you, you may have someone that can be more of an expert than you, and capitalizing on that knowledge is where true leadership defines you versus being just a traditional boss. In that particular experience, you now were leading a great distributor of beer, and you had the opportunity to see a market that you had never experienced before. And now you're going to your next journey. What was the next journey?
Yeah, so actually the first one, right, or that role was that more of that revenue management or that support role. The second one was really, I think, being thrown into the day-to-day, the operation, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually the distributor, the one that is taking the product and bringing it to the shelves of all the stores and the bars and restaurants and stadiums in a city. And I think it was a very eye-opening experience of just because you learn how to lead one type of team doesn't mean that you are an all-encompassing leader.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned quickly was the individuals that were within that distributor of that team were different, had very different motivations than a team that was, call it, high capacity, high profile analytics team, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a region office. And so individuals that were more of a, merchandiser, sales rep, sales manager are different. And they're motivated.
There's a culture within each group of individuals you're leading, and that culture may be unique, and it requires and challenges you to have to change your leadership, right?
Absolutely. And so it I think required an evolution or a change of who I was and how I operated day to day with that team and with that organization, because it also went from a team of 10 total that was close knit and you can walk and talk and connect with everyone in the moment when you're all in the office, to a more dispersed organization, 80 to 100 people, depending on kind of the time that we were in. Those individuals are potentially layers removed from where you are, and you might not talk to them for months on end. And so how do you lead in that environment with a different profile and different background of individuals is also was a challenge, right? And something to kind of figure out over time.
Let me ask you, because there's a lot of listeners that are in the current mindset in the world, which is entrepreneurship is only opening your own business. And a lot of people have not really made the connection that entrepreneurship has two pathways. You either open your own business or you decide to lead in a business. What's the difference, and why did you choose to continue the journey of leading in a business versus opening your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's different skill sets involved. And so that same framework that we talked about earlier, I think if you have the opportunity to meet true entrepreneurs, individuals who have started businesses from nothing, and you look at who are they, what have they had to go through in their career, and evaluate for yourselves, do I have that skill set? Do I have the true ability to build something from nothing, right? Be an advocate for myself when no one else believes in you, right? And go through the struggles and the risks associated with that. It's an admirable path, right? And it's a really difficult one. And it takes certain skill sets and temperament to make that happen. Versus the other path, right, is being in a business, a large organization, right? It takes a different type of skill set, a different type of temperament, and an approach to creating value in that organization. And ultimately, I've had the opportunity through the steps in my career to experience, not directly, right, but be with and near entrepreneurs and understand at, maybe not as deep of a level, but at a high enough level to evaluate, is this for me? Am I a fit? And on the other path, be in the business and help elevate and hopefully get that to the next level. I ultimately made the decision earlier on that I loved being in the business, call it an internal entrepreneur, to help drive a business to the next level. And I think that the skill set required, the temperament, the approach, is something that I resonated very, very deeply with and have kind of built a skill set or training ground over time to get there.
I like the way you classified it as an internal entrepreneur. That really is a unique way to describe it. I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about the differences between you do a startup and you create something from nothing and you come into a business that has already been established and that you're leading, what would you say are the skill sets that someone needs to really think about as they're reflecting? Because it seems from just what we've spoken about so far that you're very reflective in when you make your decisions, right? You are honest with yourself. You use the mirror to tell you what skill sets you have, which ones you don't, and which ones are important, right? Can you tell me a little bit about what are those skill sets that the listeners should take into account when they're deciding, do I want to open a startup and build something from nothing, or do I want to be an internal entrepreneur? What would those skill sets be if you could highlight three?
Sure. Let's start with the entrepreneur, true entrepreneurship, starting a business. I think one, it is a deep understanding of an industry or a problem that you're solving. And often some very successful entrepreneurs are ones that have spent a very long time in a specific market, in a specific situation. Take yourself as an example, right? You have a very long and successful career in education before you could truly see some of the issues to be able to solve them. So I think that's critical. The second one, I think, is salesmanship, right? It's the ability to sell. You're going to consistently have to sell yourself to your investors, to your customers, to your employees, right? You have to sell all the time and have those individuals even it's a tougher sale because you're selling someone something that doesn't exist yet, right? So you have to be truly incredible at that. And then the last one is grit, right? You're going to get told no more times than you can imagine. So being able to every day get up and continue with that same passion, even after being told no 100 times, maybe the day before, the month before, it's hard, right? So those are 3 skill sets there. I think
before we go on to the next one, I think that for our listeners, you heard today 3 characteristics that you should take into account, 3 skill sets that you should have when reflecting, is opening my own business and building something from nothing the right choice? And we heard that number 1 is you have to have had a long-term experience in the industry that you're selecting to open your business in, making sure that you've lived as many aspects of that industry as possible to be able to open that and create that you're trying to build. The second thing that was mentioned is you need to be able to have a sales experience and a trait that allows you to sell yourself, sell your business, sell your service, sell the product, whatever it is that you're going to be doing. You need to be able to have that skill set to do it every day, because as the owner, as the leader, as the entrepreneur, you're going to have to do that. And number 3, you need to be willing to hear no, but still want to search for that yes and go beyond the no and continue the journey, making sure that you have that endurance and that grit to overcome the first, the second, the third, even the 4th no, and look for that yes that you're going to have. So if you're trying to open a business and deciding, am I going to be an entrepreneur on my own, building something from nothing? Those 3 characteristics we heard today are very important for you. Now let's go to the internal entrepreneur. What are those skill sets that I should take into account as I'm reflecting? Is that the one for me?
And I think some of these skills transfer across, right? So I do think, right, salesmanship, I think grit, they all apply. But you know, if you're really saying what are the 3 in my mind, maybe some of the top skills. One, I think it's a little bit of a different type of mentality of how you approach situations. It's almost an adaptability or ability to evaluate a lot of data, a lot of situational awareness, I guess, to be able to step into an existing organization and be able to say, okay, here's a lot of stuff that's already happening, and be able to say, okay, here's maybe what's good and what's bad about that, right? So it's an ability to kind of evaluate data, evaluate an understanding of the situation and kind of diagnose. 2, I do think it's really important in a similar way to what we talked about with the entrepreneur to understand in that industry or in that business type, what does good look like? Because you're going to see a lot of examples and you're going to see some individuals or things that happen that aren't good based on your evaluation and are good, but you need to know what good is. So, and what good is in some industries isn't good in other industries. And so I think that's important. Similar to what we said about the entrepreneur needing to spend time or know an industry deeply, I think there are, call it, shortcuts to some of these things, right? One is 30 years experience in an industry. Another way is having the opportunity and maybe luck to get exposure to leaders in an industry. So I was lucky and fortunate at Anheuser-Busch to be able to get exposure to very senior individuals and see true examples of what good looks like. And then the last one, I think, is very strong communication skills. As we talked about leading a team, you're going to have an organization already. You're going to have to be able to communicate across different tiers of that organization with very different people and come across in a strong way with a consistent message that other individuals can ultimately, hopefully, buy into and be excited by. And so I think those 3, kind of the diagnosing or analytic skills, the understanding of what good looks like for that industry and that type of business, and then the ability to kind of communicate and get that idea of what good looks like across to others, not just in a PowerPoint slide, right, that looks pretty, but in a way that actually comes to life day to day in the execution of the business.
So we heard 3 things that are really important as you are going into a position of an internal entrepreneur or deciding if it's for you. First, the level of adaptability that you need to have to be able to go into an organization, diagnose it, look at the data, and decide what do I need to fix? What don't I need to fix? What is good? What is not working? And be able to have the experience to make the decisions to guide the changes where changes need to happen, and continue and expand and accelerate those that are already working. What's really important in that process is making sure you don't have an ego saying, I'm coming into this organization and I have to make everything be me and I have to change everything just because I'm here and there's a new sheriff in town. The second thing you heard is that you should have had exposure to other leaders in the industries to be able to learn good practices and bad practices so that you can apply those as you're leading the organizations, and that you can go into that bank of tools that you've acquired and be able to do that. And the last one is communication, understanding you're going to be leading a team you did not do from the ground up, the team that you're inheriting, and you have to be able to assess where they are, engage with them, and more importantly, build the trust that's going to yield the results. So you heard from someone who has had the opportunity to be in numerous organizations, and more importantly, in positions that have now led him to be where he's at now. And now currently you're doing what?
So through this opportunity, I think I've built the skill sets. I think it was a really good way to put it. It's kind of like a toolkit. And one of the advisors or individuals I had a fortune of working for in my career called it a backpack, where you're putting different things into that backpack as you're going on this like really long and arduous journey. And so I had this opportunity through my networking, through just individuals that I've met, to ultimately take kind of more of a bet, right, and partner with this group, the Bryden Group, to go on a path of entrepreneurship through acquisition. So this type of entrepreneurship that we've talked about, having the opportunity to search for and acquire a business. And then my role is a little bit unique, where it's not just the investment skill set that my partners and I are kind of bringing forward, but then it's stepping into that organization, as we were just talking about, and hopefully continuing the great legacy that it has and has built in the industry, and amplifying that business over time, right? And driving it to a next level of success and growth for the employees, the customers, for our investors as well. And so this path of searching for, acquiring, and leading a business is the one I'm on now.
So currently you're in which organization, and what are the steps that you're following to be able to do that?
Yep. And so in some ways, I'm a partner, right, and part of the Bryden Group organization. In other ways, I'm a solo entrepreneur, where I'm representing myself as this individual that's going to be partnering with and leading a business. So it's an interesting dynamic to balance. But then I'm right now in the search phase of that three-step process, right, where we're looking at different businesses, we're evaluating whether they're a good fit for what we need, and then frankly, if we're a good fit for what they need. Right? Because our model and our approach isn't exactly what everyone's looking for.
But you got the best of both worlds. You're not opening your business, but you're experiencing the feeling, because in reality, you're looking for the business you're going to lead. Yep. But then also you're able to benefit from the support of those experienced entrepreneurs that are currently around you as your partners, as well as the finance capital that allows you to be able to invest in those in the businesses you're going to be acquiring. So you're getting an amazing opportunity and experience. What is your definition of a quality CEO? If you could define the characteristics of a CEO that you would want to emulate, what would that be?
I think it's an individual that ultimately, this concept in my mind of servant leadership is one that I've heard earlier in my career. I've gotten the chance to live. And I think some of the best CEOs, especially today, in their mindset are servant leaders, where they're willing to do things like taking out the trash, right? Like doing the not glamorous work, as an example, that needs to be done for the organization. And I think when you do that work, in a weird way, you might think that it undermines your leadership position, that when people see that, they're not going to respect you. But it's actually, and I think especially with my generation, maybe younger generations, I think a lot of individuals respect that. I think that a great CEO, especially nowadays, has and hopefully can demonstrate vision, can see the world is changing so fast and evolving through technology, through communication, different things. So being able to see what might be and take a bet to get there is something that I think a great CEO are taking that responsibility on themselves. And there's a lot of investors, employees, customers that are riding on that, hopefully being a right bet. And then ultimately, I think this, even leaning a little further, adaptability, right? The industries that, even I think you're leading in today is different than it was 10 years ago. The beer industry was a really interesting example where the landscape has evolved so quickly. Even 5 years ago, it was a different business. And so having this ability to adapt your skill set and how you operate and the tools you use, I think is even more and more critical as time passes.
So if you are interested in being a CEO and you want to understand what are some of the characteristics of success, we heard 3 today. The first characteristic, servant leadership, showing your team that you are capable, able, and willing to do anything in the organization that anyone else has to do, and that you're not worried about what that means. You're more worried about getting the job done. And through that, you're really being an example of what leadership truly is as a servant leader. Second, we understood that it's really important that as a CEO, you have a vision. And not only a vision that you can communicate, but a vision that you can develop the action plan to accomplish and to eventually have the vision manifest. And last but not least, you want to be able to be adaptable. You have to understand that time evolves, people evolve, situations evolve, and expectations evolve. And as a CEO, you have to be able to understand what that evolution is and be able to adapt your own leadership, as well as be able to use your team to develop their leadership in a way that's going to take you to be able to have that level of adaptation to what's happening currently. Now you're going to be looking for a particular organization. Is there a specific industry that you're looking to navigate and be with and that you're hoping to lead?
It's a combination of a specific business model and a specific type of industry. So from a business model perspective, one, it's trying to evaluate what's a good, call it investment opportunity from a scientific rubric, right, and framework. But more importantly for me, it's trying to identify where do I have a skill set and deep passion for a type of business. And as I've gone through my experiences, particularly those at Anheuser-Busch, I've realized that I love building tools, building kind of technologies, not crazy high tech, but simple tools, simple technologies that help operators, help individuals who are truly running the business day to day be better at what they're doing. We brought some of those tools forward in some of the last roles that I was in, and it transformed the businesses and business results. And so first is the business model or the type of solution. It's software or tech-enabled services for specific end markets. So being kind of a service provider, an assistant to some of the operators in the industries. The second one is the type of industry. Is we're looking specifically at highly regulated end markets, which might seem counterintuitive. Some investors or folks try to avoid those. What we found is one aspect, there's almost a double bottom line to some of these businesses where it's a great business, it's a great end market, but also that they're accomplishing something that's critically important, for the economy, for the industry that they're in. So that's cool, right? But also from a, call it investment or logical perspective, these industries have specific requirements. It's not as easy to just take a general technology and apply it to them. They're very specific in how they operate. So it takes tailored tools that need to work in them. And then the last piece is, if you're a service provider to the government, as an example, or, highly regulated, like the medical field, you need to operate at the highest levels of rigor, of security, of different facets of how you operate your business. So we found that businesses that are able to operate in these industries and be successful are incredible businesses. The product, the service they provide are at the highest levels. And so we're hopeful, if we're fortunate enough to be able to find a business to partner with, it'll be one that both me and my partners are deeply passionate about, has a great impact, right, that we can be proud of, but also would be an incredible business that has high, call it barriers to entry, that it's difficult, to compete against because they're at the highest level of their game.
So as you're going into this search, if you had to define the culture of the organization that you would want to lead, what would that be?
I would love to step into or work with an organization and hopefully develop it even more so over time in 2 aspects. One is passion, right? I love to work with individuals that are deeply, deeply passionate about what they're building. And so that's part of it, getting to meet these entrepreneurs. All they care about is solving that need, that they did it and took a huge risk earlier in their career because of this deep passion for whatever they're doing. And then the other one is maybe close-knit, right? So we'll put a hyphen in between the 2 words, but close-knit. It would be great to work with an organization and a team that they have a great bond together. And we were speaking earlier, you described your organization, right, of how close-knit and how tightly built the team is, that they all can step in and support each other's needs and strengths. And that's something that's awesome. That's just a lot of fun to be a part of.
I can tell you that a lot of people misinterpret the word family at work. Some leaders tend to not realize the importance of building the professional family, where you, through the connections that they have, they're there for each other, just like you would be for your family. Yeah. And in some organizations, the teams they call themselves a team, but you really know if a team is a team when the going gets tough. In the good, everyone's a team. But when someone needs to be there and step in and do something for someone else among the team, that's when you really determine if that team is really there. As a future CEO in right now, you are a CEO in residence, and as listeners that are in your same shoes of wanting to aspire to be a CEO, why should they go into a residence program similar to the one you're in?
I think it's an opportunity that, first, there's a couple aspects. One is mentorship, right? I think individuals may believe, and there's a lot of confidence that can be built over time, especially if you've had success in different parts of your career, can believe that, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to be the best, right? And I think that's required. But also the opportunity that I have is to work with 3 very, very talented individuals, and ultimately even the broader Bryden group are really, really talented folks. And so having the chance to kind of have a mentorship approach, learn from these individuals who have been very successful in their careers, and kind of continue to develop myself is awesome. So that's one. And then 2 is ultimately the market that we're operating in, again, from a kind of a scientific or more structured approach is very competitive, right? There's a lot of folks out there that want to acquire businesses. It's an industry that has generated great financial returns, right, for the investors and folks that have taken a bet. So I do think stepping into that world with a partner, with a strong partner, with a team, right, that can execute together in a focused way, I do think is a great way to go about taking this type of risk.
As a future CEO, what question do you have in your mind that you think Lead with Jeffrey today could answer for you?
I think ultimately there's a couple facets. Like, one, learning from you, Jeffrey, is something that, as an individual who has gone through and built a business, I hope to continue learning from you and speaking with you and learning about how you have managed that team, how you have kind of built the organization to be one that can be successful and that kind of work family, right? So that's one aspect. 2 is, I do think that you are an example of a great business owner that may be thinking about succession and who's that next individual to take my business to the next level potentially. And so as I'm speaking with executives, with great entrepreneurs, I would love to speak with you more and learn about what are the things that are top of mind for you, right? And what type of person would you love to partner with? What are the skills that they need to have? What are the type of demeanor that they need to have, right? So I'd love to learn from you as an entrepreneur, as an example of potential individuals I'm going to speak with and kind of move forward with in my career as well.
The first question you asked was, as an entrepreneur building a team, and one of the things that I've always aimed at is understanding the characteristics of an energy. I believe that a team is an energetic field that have different puzzle pieces that you put together. And as you hire the individuals for your team, you need to think about which puzzle piece is missing. So if I look at my senior leadership right now, each of them have different puzzle pieces that when you bring them together, they're one energy. And at the table, not one person has all of the skill sets to have every aspect of the decision making that you need. And so when I come to my team with a project, with an initiative, I find that by having that diversity among them has a benefit because it gives different perspectives. Often leaders make the mistake of wanting to find everyone to be like them, because it is more comfortable when everyone is like you. There's less pushback, less battles, less resistance. And it sometimes makes your sales efforts with your own team less complicated, right? But it has a drawback in that you are missing out on a lot of perspectives that could benefit you in making the decision. You said something earlier that I had never defined it that way, but it was something that I definitely will put in my backpack, is that you have 2 ears and you have one mouth. And the benefit of a CEO that has a diversified team is that you are able, if you listen, you're able to get ahead of glitches that could delay your returns. Yeah. And so as a future CEO, if I could give you one recommendation in that aspect, is to first analyze what you are strong in and don't find anyone that has that strength. Find the people around you that have the areas that you're not. For example, I'm very good at organizing a vision. I'm very good at project managing a vision at the 13,000 foot level. But when it comes to the deadline, the owner, the position that comes with the project management, that's where I have my chief operating officer, who his strength is that. I'm very good at establishing a vision and selling the vision to my team, but that backdoor political conversation that's required may not be there all the time. And that's why I have my chief of HR. And so understanding that it takes everyone's skill set together to make that energy. And long gone are the days that the leader is one person, it's an energy. So that would be the question that I answer there. With regards to succession, I think a lot of leaders forget that we're here for a temporary journey. And they get so engaged in the weeds of their business that they forget to develop the ability for the business to outlive their last breath. And I was taught by a mentor early on in my career that you should identify a succession plan the first day you become CEO. And you should already know who you want to lead your organization, not by name, but by characteristics. And as you are looking for the people around you, and as you are developing the people around you, you are every day looking at who's going to be you when you're not there. And what's really unique is as a CEO, you're going to find that changes every day. Every day you say, okay, this is the person. And then you see, well, maybe not. Maybe this is the person. And that makes the journey exciting, is developing those skill sets. But the error that a lot of people have is that they don't think of the succession plan. And then a surprise happens in their life, and the business that you work so hard to build, you lose. And so as you go into the role, even though you are an internal CEO and not necessarily the owner of the organization, even though you're going to have equity, you need to start identifying that person internally that's going to be there. Because even in your case where you're finding the business and you're going to acquire it, that's okay, because it's a long-term planning that the owner is doing to retire or to move on. But what happens if the owner has an accident, gets sick, dies, and internally there's no one able to run it until someone like you comes? It could create a gap in their financial stability. So those would be my two perspectives in those two questions, just on the 13,000 foot vision.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
As we come to the closing of our podcast today, I have been invigorated by listening to the journey of someone who has really understood leadership at a global level, has understood that it takes experiences to be able to lead eventually an organization, and who has made it his personal agenda to learn from every experience. We had a gentleman here today that started in the vault of finance, went into private equity, went to leading a beer distributor, and currently is in an organization where he's not only a partner, but also an isolated entrepreneur who's trying to find where he's going to be the CEO. And as you heard from him, along each journey that he learned when it was the time to move on, because as he looked at his senior leader in that organization, the work-life balance, the day-to-day operations and struggles at the senior level was going through, he said, that's not what I want to do. Yeah, maybe that's what I want to do. And when he discovered that it was not what he wanted to be, he knew it was time to move on. A rubric that a lot of our business students, our business practitioners need to think about as they're planning their future. The second thing you heard from him is that it's really important that you have a great level of adaptability in how you lead and how you engage as a leader that's upcoming in the career. You need to be able to go in, understand that things evolve, things change, it's inevitable, and the way you adapt to that is going to make you truly successful. If you decide to not adapt, you could fail by not being able to change your leadership to address the circumstances as they're evolving. You heard that being a salesperson in business is very important. Whether you're actually direct selling something or you're just leading it, you have to be able to sell it to those around you through the quality communication that's required for your team to understand your vision and take it to an actual reality. And so as you are aiming to go into business, whether it's to open your own company or to lead a company internally, you heard today great story about a gentleman who has made it his business to prepare himself to be a quality leader. I know as a CEO, if I was looking today to transition my organization to someone that would be in your particular place in life right now as a CEO in residence, just hearing you today, I would definitely hire you and select you. So
Thanks.
Congratulations for your accomplishments. I wish you the best of luck on behalf of Lead with Jeffrey. I can't wait to read about your success and more importantly, bring you back, not as a CEO in residence, but now as the CEO of a company that you acquired. Is there any last minute advice, last minute wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners that maybe we have not touched upon that would help them become you one day?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. I am hopeful that, one day we'll come back and be able to talk about the next leg of the journey. Just the last piece that I was thinking through a little bit is earlier in your career, especially in academics and early roles, the role is about always being right? Or getting that work done to perfection. And I think what you learn as you move forward and are actually leading an organization is you're going to be wrong a lot. And it's actually, if you're constantly, as an operator especially, even as an investor, you're making bets over time, hundreds of bets, and maybe more so as an operator, right? Day to day, you're making bets and choices. And hopefully, if you can get, I think even 70%, 60% of those bets right, the organization is going to do very, very well, right? As an example, some of the best batters in history in baseball are batting a 300, right? So that means 30% they're actually hitting. They're missing 70%. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind earlier in your career is these operators, CEOs, great CEOs aren't perfect, but it's having that confidence to kind of keep hitting, keep going up to bat. And ultimately, if you can get the percentage higher and higher over time, like that's going to lead to a lot of success.
I think something you're stating right now is really important for our young entrepreneurs, because we know that in the current generation that's upcoming, there is an ego that's interfering with the ability to be humble. And one of the characteristics of becoming an effective leader is being humble enough to know you made a mistake, seeing it, owning it, and more importantly, understanding that doesn't mean you're failing. It just means it's another opportunity to learn something different and to move on. And second, I really liked something you mentioned is that when you are not perfect, you have to be open to feedback. And a lot of our young entrepreneurs don't want to hear feedback, take feedback as a judgment instead of an opportunity to learn. So thank you for highlighting that, because I think our listeners, particularly the young entrepreneurs, would benefit from that message that you just shared. I would like to thank our listeners for joining us today. Thank you, Arthur, again for being here. And I hope that you found today's session very empowering to you, as the purpose of our podcast is to make you empowered to make the right decisions and be a change in the world, one action at a time. As you are continuing your journey in the business world, make sure you're taking some of the things you heard today into account. Subscribe, follow, for you can stay empowered by listening to our sessions. Stay inspired.